Hello there, and my name is Brijesh, and I'll be discussing about why everybody should learn how to program. And there's a wide range of reasons why you should learn how to program. But then, initially, like I started to learn how to program around 2020, September or October, around that time. And at that time, I used to basically think that programming is this kind of thing mainly like for nodes and stuff, and I'm not very good at it. That I'll fail at it, and overall I think there's also like this notion of like when you open television you're going to see some advertisements from certain companies, not going to name any, but then I think you'll know which ones anyways. So um, you'll notice that they portray it to be like a Herculean task, and then like they make it seem really difficult. And then there's also the stereotype that goes like that programmers are like really big nerds and stuff. And perhaps like if you watch any movies and stuff, like you'd notice that there's typically like yeah, the movie coders are not really like real programmers, like they're not realistic, but nonetheless. So um there's a few things which like really helps when you're learning how to program. And over here, so there's lots of things which come into it. First and foremost, it's about like we all have comfort zone, and programming will help you get out of that comfort zone, and it'll help you like build really cool stuff as you see like and you use every day around yours, like the different kinds of apps, websites. We all use them on a regular basis now. And then there's programming is very flexible, and we're going to be discussing about that because everybody has different requirements, and what they want to build is also always different. And different there's different programming languages, and like programming languages are used to speak directly to the computer and tell it what to do. And different programming languages have like they have different um, some programming languages, for example, might have a higher writing time, but then there's a lower running time, and it happens the other way around in like certain programming languages. And we're going to be discussing about that. And then there's again about learning everything and math. And then there's other benefits from programming which extend like critical thinking and problem solving. And then finally, at the end of the video, I'll just share some reference sources which I'll also link down in the description, and that should be helpful to you for getting started. So, the comfort zone and building cool stuff. Now, we've all been there where like you just see like an app or website, and then you're like, okay, fine, I want to build something as cool as that. Or many of us often have ideas, but then like we can't really bring them to reality because we don't know how to do stuff. And then programming really helps you bridge that gap. And then there's again many times this is a case even with like many experienced programmers where they have this thing like they experience imposter syndrome, where they they feel like they're being imposters because thing is programming, it'll take some time when you're starting off, and then like you'll take time to learn stuff, but then you're going to be able to get there, and you'll be able to build cool stuff much quicker than you'd actually think you would, because programming languages like depends really on a lot of factors. But yeah. And then there's like all of us are always stuck in the comfort zone, which is like we're used to doing something, and that's basically like where we are stuck. And learning how to program will really help you in getting out of the comfort zone, because there's certain people who I've met, and I always recommend people to like learn how to program. But then there's like some of my friends were there, and like one of my friends the other day, he was asking me that why do you want to learn how to program if you don't like want a job in it. And that's kind of an interesting question, because programming is something which like lots of people think that you only should learn how to program if you like if you're working in the field or something similar like that. And then like you shouldn't really be getting out of your comfort zone in that case, and like you're not a computer person. The thing is that your abilities are not always there. Like you develop your abilities, and it helps you like step out of your comfort zone in general. And thing is, it's not just like you're learning how to do it for the job, because let's say if you're learning something, and then like if but then you are working in a separate field, and like the, it's kind of like you're not sure how will that help like how will programming directly affect like what you're learning. But then there's actually the thing with programming that it's like you can learn how to develop something, and then you can take it and apply it in your own field. Like for example, there's Google Maps or like Uber or Ola, just for some examples, where like they basically just like there's the cabs and like there's all of that kind of stuff where, and they just like utilizing your geolocation. They utilizing programming more so in general, because like it's not that there's like a whole different field for that stuff. It's just like they're taking what's already there and then they're like using programming to enhance that. It's not like maps weren't there before that, but then Google Maps made it so much more convenient. And it's not always about like coming up with new ideas of your own, but then like building upon ideas that already exist, and that will help you like in developing really cool stuff. And maybe you can actually make a very significant contribution to your field. Or even if it's not anything professional, it's still a very fun activity in general, and that should be very helpful. So the next thing is that many people are stuck in the comfort zone, as like we just discussed, and it's like they think that they've got to spend like hours and hours like in trying to learn how to program, and that's not really the case yet again. um, Programming is, as I've just mentioned, it's a very flexible thing, and like you're basically writing code to convey a message to the computer. And then for this, like for telling the computer to do something, which is like you have the model of like input, and then there's the processing and there's the output. So for this, like you're for this like telling the computer what to do, you need a certain programming language. And there's lots of different programming languages, and they can be very broadly classified into high level languages and low level languages, which is like level languages are typically languages which are used for things like when you're working close to the computer's memory and all of that stuff, where or something like where time is of essence. And low level languages are typically like much more time consuming to write code, but then it's kind of they also deliver you more speed. And high level languages, they take lesser time to write code and they have their different applications. But then again, like it takes you like more when you're running the program itself, it'll take you more time. But then thing with low level languages is like you only use them for very specific tasks, because not everybody needs as much speed as they actually offer. They're very powerful in that sense. But let's say if you want to work close to hardware or computational models or something along those lines, then you'll find programming in low level languages like C and C++ very helpful. Fortran is actually used in certain fields, and you're going to find if you want to like develop apps or websites, you'll find certain, or if like you just want to do something that's like helpful more so in general, but then you don't have much time, then maybe you want to spend less time writing code and like you want to spend like most of the time like the stuff actually happening. And then there's the thing that people take these low level languages and then they basically using these languages they build high level languages which have more features. And this makes it easier for like building cooler stuff, and it will take you much less time more so in general. As for like a developer survey which was taken recently, it takes around like 31 times as much to write code in like C++ as it is compared to like in Python. And there's like lots of different kind of there's a wide variety of use cases, and if it depends upon like whether you value your writing time more or your running time more. But then there's like if you want to like develop apps or websites, which is like the general way in which we use computers more so in general every day, then you might want to refer to high level languages like Python or JavaScript. And I guess this might be confusing at the start, and that's perfectly fine. But then programming is more so it's very flexible, and you don't need to like necessarily like work in the field and in order to have the best of the benefits that it offers to you. And depending upon your needs and the amount of time you can spend on it, you can basically choose your programming language, and then on that basis you can do similar stuff. There's lots of like programming languages where you can do similar stuff in lots of different programming languages, but then there's different features and stuff in the various languages. And that's kind of how it works most when yeah. And then there's the next topic, that is of learning everything plus math. So if programming is something where you don't really learn everything, It's let's say you were to you're trying to learn something, and then you don't really learn everything. Like even the most experienced people in the various fields in which they're working, the most experienced programmers, they don't know everything about the language that they're using, or like they don't know everything about like whatever they're doing, because programming is very vast and you're never going to know too much. So it's okay, don't feel too guilty. Like if you're experiencing any trouble with like not knowing enough for something, you're going to eventually like gradually learn more and more. And then there's the next thing, that is math. Programming is actually quite closely associated with math, because you do need certain mathematical skills for doing programming, and math does help because math includes logical and problem solving like tactics. And problem solving is actually like basically what programming is in a nutshell, because a computer can't do anything without like your instructions. So you're basically like trying to figure out a way how to like tell the computer to do stuff using certain programming languages. And at the end of the day, it's just like taking your thoughts and then telling something else, a machine, to do it, so that basically you're able to do the thing in a much nicer way. And henceforth you do need like certain, to a certain extent, but it's not very complicated math, and it's like very basic stuff. And you're not going to like, there's certain fields which will need more math because some things are more complex. That's not necessarily like always the case, and you'll find yourself being able to like a lot of complex stuff overall, like even without much like math in there. And that's kind of it. So let's move on to the next topic now: critical thinking and problem solving. And these are like the most crucial parts of programming, because at the end of the day, you have this model where like you have input, and then you have, you're giving the input to the computer, and then it's basically like the processing is happening, and then there's the output delivered to the user. So it's, you're the one who's going to be writing the processing part, which is like an algorithm. And for this, there's going to be different kinds of use cases, and then again, you're going to need to think critically and think in different kinds of ways. And you're going to be have to see like how can things be done in different manner. And you're going to need like patterns, and you'll have to break down a larger problem many times into smaller problems. And then there's many tools for doing that stuff. There's certain programming paradigms like object oriented programming and functional programming for that. But like that's not necessary for you to know right now. You'll get familiar with it if you're going to learn about it. um, but nonetheless, so you're going to need to learn how to take a larger problem and then break it down into simpler problems, so that you can solve each of the individual problems at a time. And it's okay, because at the start it'll be much more difficult, but then if you're like, if the same thing will, after a certain point of time, as you practice more and more, you're going to get very familiar with it, and it'll become much easier for you to do the same thing. And if it actually doesn't become easier, then that's probably because you're just like learning more and more, because it becomes easy when you're familiar with like a single concept. So more so in general, you're going to find that helpful overall. And don't get too stressed. You can always just don't get too stressed about like your problems in programming, because they're going to be helpful. And there's certain debugging tactics, and there's even one which is like funnily enough called as rubber duck debugging, where like you have let's say if you have some topic on which like you want to rant on, then you basically go to your family or your friends and stuff. But then not everybody wants to listen to problems of code, so like you can go and like talk to a duck. And like many people, like they place a sponge ball or like a rubber duck on the table, and then they basically just talk to it and they explain their code to it. And that sometimes like helps them in cooling down. And you'll find yourself getting better and better at problem solving overall, and that should be very helpful for you in the long term. And programming really like helps you to express, and if you want to express it, then it's very helpful, because it really simplifies lots of steps as long as you can think how to do it. Because again, like the critical thinking is crucial in it. But then that's fine, you're gonna like, it's not something that's there with you already. You'll slowly, as you practice more and more, you'll develop it with your experience. So yes, there we go. And finally, Of course, like all of this stuff is there, but then you have to also like start learning from certain sources. And the best sources which I know of are over here. So for self-learning, you will find edX.org very helpful. Um, there's this course known as CS50 by Harvard University, and then there's many other courses which are there on edX, which should help you in getting started because well, they have very detailed courses, and all of them are very good for learning. And then there's Free Code Camp, then there's Code Academy, there's Coursera, and actually even YouTube. Yes, because YouTube has got lots of like tutorials from various people, and you can always learn more and more. And it's kind of YouTube, you can actually use it for self-learning in many ways, and programming is just there, like among those things. I think almost anybody would have at this point, like watch certain videos on like topics when they're confused through YouTube. And then there's the other things like you have certain communities like Stack Overflow and Free Code Camp forums, which should help you in like if you're getting stuck anywhere, you can always ask other people to help you or how to like they can always like help you and explain stuff to you where you're going wrong, and that's generally helpful. The whole point of programming is like it's something that you can't really learn like through a textbook or something. You need practical experience, and it's always nice to have someone like who can explain things to you, and these forums do exactly that. And then finally there's going to be like lots of tools and stuff and some of them include Git and GitHub, which you'll eventually you're not going to like use them immediately when you're getting started, but then after a while, yes, you will indeed. So thank you and see you next time.